We have the 2025 S90F going up against the 2024 S90D. Both of these TVs use some type of Samsung Display QD OLED panel. However, your region may be using an LG Display W OLED panel, which is less capable than a Samsung Display QD OLED panel. So you're definitely going to want to look into that. Now, looking at the spec sheet for the S90F versus the S90D, there's not a lot of differences here other than the processor. There's not anything that tells you this is a brighter panel, even though it clearly is a brighter panel. And measurements early on have shown that the S90F is actually closer to the S95D than it is the S90D. I can see from scene to scene that the S90F is going to be punching a little bit harder than the S90D is with certain highlights. I'm going to go ahead and pause it right here because this is a good example of that. You're probably seeing that the S90F looks brighter than the S90D, and you'd be right. When I'm pulling up the scopes, the S90F is showing that it is giving you a punchier highlight here, and that's nice to see because not always do we see improvements on paper where we see it in actual content. But yeah, we're seeing it here, and that's a good thing. But I do have to say that a lot of times when you're looking at these two TVs side by side, you're going to notice that they look very similar in most scenes, and it's not until you see those big impactful scenes where it separates. And in a lot of practical cases, I don't know that this is actually going to be a big difference maker for a lot of people, because a lot of times, like the S90D and the S90F are trading blows. I do have to say that the S90D, my one gripe about it last year was that I wish the highlights really had more punch to it, because even the C4 last year had better punch in some of the highlights than the S90D. Now granted, the C4 couldn't come close to color with the S90D, but it did have just a little bit more HDR impact with some of those highlights, and it was weird because the S90D was the more capable TV. But this year, it seems like the S90F has fixed that, because I am seeing more punchier highlights here with the S90F. One thing I really don't think you'll be able to see on camera is going to be the clarity differences here with the S90F compared to the S90D. And I'm going to guess this is probably due to the new processing that is on the S90F. There also seems to be a little bit more edge enhancement than there was last year. I first noticed this when I compared the Bravia 8 to the S90F. It really just stuck out that this was a real close fight in terms of processing, and usually Sony TVs look like they have more clarity than the Samsung TVs when I had them side by side in the past when it was OLED versus OLED. But it looks like Samsung is starting to close the gap a little bit with this edge enhancement that they have added. The addition of this has been a common theme within the TV world. We've seen manufacturers keep adding some sort of edge enhancement to keep up the perception of better clarity, and it works. It could really lead to people thinking that it has more three-dimensional depth than the other TV. So I think that's why TV manufacturers do it. So that would be an advantage over the S90D with the S90F in mind. And you're also looking at better upscaling as well with this new processor. There's some things that Samsung has done a little bit better than the S90D here, and that is clear. Now, there is a new interface on the S90F, which brings an overall snappier OS and an overall better menu system. However, the S90D is going to be getting an update to the operating system a little bit later on, and this could just make it as fast as the S90F. So it's not something that I would factor into your buying decision. On the topic of updates, I know there's a rumor out there saying that the S90D got nerfed in its brightness, but Ratings has measured this TV, and there's no changes across the board with the brightness in mind for the S90D. So you can rest assured that you're getting a good TV with the S90D, and no, your brightness hasn't been nerfed. All right, shifting off of that topic, I want to talk about something I usually don't talk about in comparisons, but since we are talking about a previous model that might soon be unavailable versus something that's brand new, this is probably a good time to talk about the value standpoint with these two TVs. Right now, the S90F is around the same price as the S95D. Now, I think that the S95D might be a slightly better TV than the S90F, but they're really close. And the S95D is going to have that screen coating that you may or may not like, but that'll be a decision that you have to make on your own because I can't make that one for you. But the S90D and the S90F, that price difference, right now it looks like at the lower end, it's like $800 difference with the 55-inch in mind. And you can get even higher than that when you're talking about the higher sizes. So value standpoint, man, I'm telling you right now that I would get the S90D. I really would. And I like all the improvements with the S90F, and I do think it is the overall better TV. And if you can wait, maybe you can get it at the same price as what the S90D is around Black Friday. But I'm seeing some closeout prices on the S90D where I would pounce on those if you're in the market for a TV right now. But if you're willing to wait, the S90F is a better TV than the S90D. But the question is how much better. We talked about HDR, I showed you guys HDR, but you do have to factor in SDR, and SDR is going to be brighter on the S90F. Gaming is also going to be brighter on the S90F. The more capable TV is always going to be better for gaming and SDR. So that's one thing that you can consider if that's something that you think about with your TV buying decision. The S90F is a year-to-year improvement over the S90D. But honestly, if we're talking about the difference between the S90F and the S90D for the most common user out there, get the S90D. It's going to be the better value and it's going to make the most sense for you at the end of the day if you're buying today. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your answer. If you want to keep watching more TV videos just like this, check out this one right here. Thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel and I hope to see you in the next one.